Hey everyone, and welcome back to my Hapi tutorial series, where now what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be showing you how to connect this database connection that we have with MySQL here to our Hapi application. So say we can display the users that we have been displaying in the console here. So let's try and display these in our application. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use this index.js file to export this function. So I'm going to do module.exports. Let's call this get users. We're going to set this equal to an async function. And then we want to take all this stuff in here, take that out, and put that in here. And then we can get rid of this. So now our database.config has a method called getUsers that we can export and use throughout our application. So let's go into server.js, and what we want to do is let's require it in here. So I'm going to do const connection equals require, and what we want to require is .-db-config. And because of course this is an index file, it will be what will be retrieved automatically. So we're just going to require this index file here and call it connection. And now let's delete a few of these paths that we're no longer using. So for example, we don't need download. So let's get rid of this. I remember all this will be in my GitHub, so if you want to stay up to date on this video, it won't be any issue. And then let's get rid of location too. Or let's delete all our roots except for login, the wildcard. So let's delete these. So we have the login, wildcard. Let's get rid of our dynamic root, and let's keep the root. So now we only have 3 routes. This makes it a bit easier. Let's make another one now, and let's call it get users. So our method is going to be get, and the path will be dash get users, and the handler will be request h like this. And this, don't forget to add this comma because it's an array of objects. And now let's test our connection. So let's do connection dot get users. So this will be this function here, and instead of logging the results, we don't need this anymore, so let's get rid of this. And instead of logging the results, let's return these results. So let's do return results, just like this. Save this. So that will be returning these here. So let's create a variable. Let's call it const users equals connection dot get users. And then what we want to do is let's log our users for now, and let's just return hi, just like this. So when you go to the dash get users page, a connection will be made to the database. Let's log them, and it'll just return hi. So let's go down here. Let's do nodemon-e, and we want to track HBS files, JS files, and let's do server.js. Oop, module.exports. Oh, spelled that wrong. So let's go in here. Yeah, module, resave. Okay, now we're running. So let's go back in here. The users page won't be found anymore. Let's do localhost. Okay, something must be wrong here. Let's go back in here. And so we are running this from within our db config. So let's go back. So we were just running it from index. So let's rerun this. So nodemon, track HBS, JS files, and server.js. Okay, starting node on server.js. Cool. So let's go back here. Refresh this. There we go. Okay. And so now what we want to do is if we go to our dash get users page, we returned hi, and let's see what's in the console. Connected, executing. Oh, so what we've returned is a pending promise. And so that is because, of course, in here we're not waiting. In here we are not waiting for the users to be returned. So what we need to do is let's make this an asynchronous function. And let's wait for our users to get. So it's going to stop here, and after the users have been retrieved, then it will print them out, and then it will return hi. Cool, so it should work now. So let's go back to here. Let's refresh this page. Go in. Oh, and so it's still saying it. That's because we didn't save. So save this file. Now let's run this again. I was going to say, I don't know why it's not working now. All right, and there we go. So we've got each of ours here. And so now, because we know how to use Vision, let's make use of that as well. So let's do for our users, let's return h.view, And the file that we want to return is within our views. What do we have? We have default, not that one. Index. Yeah, index is what it is. So double click on this, go in here. And so we want to return index. And the data we want to send along with it is users. So it's going to be accessed by this users key. And it's going to send all these users, so all this data here, to this file index.hbs. And so far we only have hello username. So let's change this. Let's add an H2 right here. And let's say the other users are, and then we're going to make use of HBS and something in each statement. So this will allow us to loop through basically an array of objects, or an array of something that we want to loop through. And what we want to loop through is users. And for each one of these users, we just want to say, let's do an H3 tag. And let's say, let's just type in the user. So we will do this dot username. And so we're going to be accessing this key username. And we're using this because this references to the current iteration through our users array. So this, when it's first looping through, this will be equal to this object. And the second time, this will be equal to this object, and so on. And then the last thing we need to do is we need to close out of this by doing dash each. And so, okay, we've saved this. We've saved this. Let's cross our fingers and hope this works. So if we do get users, the other users are, okay, it's not working right now. Let's see why that is. Okay, and this isn't working because we just wrote users like this. We didn't specify as an object. So basically in here, it won't know the user's key, won't be able to find it. So let's go back in here. Let's refresh. Hopefully it works this time. Cool. And so we have Whitcode, Greg, and Bob. And so those are equivalent to the usernames here, Whitcode, Greg, and Bob. So we can see that we are retrieving data from our server and or from our database, and we are showing it within our application. And so now the next thing I want to do is we have on our homepage this login here. Let's make it so that whenever a user logs in, so it types in their information, Whitcode1234, click login. Right now we have hello Whitcode right here. What we want to do is we want to make it so that they are also displayed in here. So let's add them to this table. And you can see when I did that for dash login, the reason the other users aren't being displayed is because we didn't go through the get users path. So now you can see they're being displayed. So we were just going through, we were sending a post request in here to dash login, and then we were returning just this. We weren't accessing it through here. So just in case you're wondering. But anyway, so what we're going to be using to do this is something called models. And so what a model basically is in Sequelize, it's a Sequelize thing, and it's basically a way to represent a table. And it makes it it's basically a table in MySQL. A model is a table in MySQL, but for Sequelize. So let's go into our index.js here. And what we want to do is, instead of exporting this, let's get rid of this, and let's just export this right here. So we can do module.exports, let's call it connect, equals this Sequelize instance. So when we connect, or no, let's not do it this way. Let's return the way we were. Let's create this, and then let's do module.exports.connect equals Sequelize. So we're going to export this, which is basically our connection, which then we can use. So for example, we were using in here connection.getUsers, when what we could do is now, just to set up our connection, is we could do something like await connection.connect, and then from there, this would be our connection to the database. So we could call this something like db connection, and then if we had that method, we could do like db connection.getUsers. So now we've exported our connection so we can use it throughout our application. And so for our models, let's create another folder. So we have our db config. Let's go into the main folder, and let's just call this models. And then within models, let's create a file. Let's call it users, is that a .js. And then the first thing we want to do is we want to import our connection. So let's do connection equals require. And so now what we have to do is we have to go back a space, because we have to go to db config. So I believe you do ... But of course, first we have to specify where we are. So from our current directory, let's go back 2 spaces. And then from there, let's go into dbconfig. So this should find this index here, and then we can use our connection. So let's do const db connection equals connection dot connect. So now we've got our DB connection, so we can interact with our database in here. The next thing that we want to require is something called data types. So we're going to require this from Sequelize. And what data types allows us to do is specify the data type of our columns in our table that we're going to be creating. And so to create a table with Sequelize, what you use is dbconnection.define. And what we're going to define is a table. And let's call this table users. And then the next thing that we pass is a constructor, which is just basically the options or the columns that we want to have on our table. And so let's go here first, actually, and let's drop this table. Or not the schema, no, don't drop the schema, drop the table. So go in here to users, and let's just do drop table, and then just drop it. And from there, let's go back into here. And so now when we create this, when we actually run this, there should be a new table that goes in here called users. So the first thing we wanted to have was a user ID. Or first, let me show you something else. Let's just do username first. And what we want the username to be, you do type, and we want data types dot string. And then the next thing is, let's do password. And that is for type, let's do data types dot string again. So we've got this set up like this. And then another thing you can pass is options. And what the options, so pass here, a third argument for define is custom options. And one that I like to do is freeze table name. And basically, I believe that's how you correctly spell it. But basically what this does is Sequelize has some under the hood functionality where it'll pluralize your table. So say, for example, you do user, it'll make it users in here. So I just like to know that it's the exact same name that I'm creating in here. So it's freeze table name, and set that equal to true. And so we do have to capitalize the N here, so it is just like that. And now the next thing we want to do is we want to sync this. So we want to sync this with our connection, so our tables are the same within our application and within our database. So now that we've done that, I believe we can just run this file. So let's change our directory into models, list what we have here, we're in the right place. Let's just do node users.js. And you can see what it's doing. So it's creating a table if it does not exist. So if it doesn't exist, it's going to sync it. If the table did exist, you can actually override it by specifying certain options in here. I believe it's something like force equals true, but we don't have that table, so we're not going to worry about that. And you can see it's created an ID automatically, not null. It's done our username with 255 for datatype.string, same with the password. And it's also created some fields that we don't really care for and don't really want. But so if we go in here, refresh, you can see users is in here again, and you can see in here all the columns. So we have ID, username, and everything like that. So we have created a table from within here. But so let's get rid of these columns that we don't really want. So we don't really want created at, updated at, information about the table. So to get rid of those, we'll pass in another option here, and this will be time stamps. I always forget if it's capitalized or not, but set that to false. And so because this is false, we won't have those. And now the next thing we want to do is we want to create our own primary key. So if you look in here, it automatically created ID right here. But we want to make our own, and we want to call it user ID. And then what we will do is we will specify its type is going to be data types.integer. And then we want to set the option primary key to true. And we want to set auto increment to true as well. So when we get a new user, it automatically increments. And of course, we need to add our comma in here. And now if we sync this again, nothing would happen, because for sync, it creates the table if it doesn't exist. So what we want to do is we want to first, you can drop a table by using just the keyword drop. And what this returns again is a promise. So let's handle that by if the database was actually dropped, then let's sync it. And let's not bother with the error because we know this is going to work. And so let's just do, yeah, so if the tables drop successfully, resync it. So now let's just run this again. You can see everything is done, drop if exists. Let's go in here. Let's refresh. Cool, and now once again we have just user ID, username, and password. So the fields that we actually want. Okay, so we're coming towards the end of this video now, but the thing we need to do is we need to add data. So let's add another row in here. And the way you do that is we should return an instance, or we should reference this with a variable. So let's do const users like this, and then let's get rid of this. And what we want to do is to add data to the table, you use the word create. And so what we want to do is, because this is auto increment, we don't have to worry about specifying an ID. But what we do need to specify is a username. So let's create a user Billy like this, and let's make their password baseball, very secure. And then from then, what this will do again is return a promise. And let's actually log the data from it. So we will do, let's log data dot to JSON, which is basically a function that will make this a lot easier to read. But so let's create this, let's add this user to the table. And so now if we run this, executing insert into, and it's inserting user ID 1, Billy, and password. So let's go back into here. Let's refresh this. And then let's run our query. And you can see it's overwritten everything with user ID 1, Billy, and baseball, but it created a new user. And the reason it did that is because, of course, we deleted our table. So those values didn't exist anymore. And so now let's create another user. Let's do one called Gene, and let's make the variable, their password will be basketball. I can spell it right, just like this. And now let's run this. Let's run it again. They've inserted user ID 2. And now let's select all the users. And you can see we have both of them in here now. So now the thing we wanted to do is with our website on the home page, we wanted, oh, this won't be running anymore because our server is down. But so what we wanted to do is we want to, on this form, where's the form? On login, we want to add this to our database. So when the data is sent with the post method to this route, we want to add it to our database. And so what we should do is we should export this create function. So let's do module.exports.create user. Let's set that equal to a function with username and password like this. And then what we want to do is just this in here. So let's copy this, paste it in here, and then instead of username, we can just type in username like this that we get from the function, and for password, we can just type in password. So when this function is called, what will happen is it'll add it to the database. So let's go in here, and for login, what we want to do is we want to use, or we have to require this. Let's do const users equals require. From the current directory, we want to go into models dash users. So we can do that, and then let's go back down here. And what we want to do is we want to do users.create user, and we want our username to be, if you can remember, we get that from request.payload.username, and then we do request.payload.password for the password. And then let's just return, once again, this is how we say hello to the username. And so if you can remember, we are getting this from that form, which is located from our form that is located here, welcome.html. We can see we have name, username, and password. And so that's why we are retrieving it from the payload as it goes to this location here, -login. So now, hopefully this works. So let's change our location back to the main page, nodemon -e. We want to monitor HBS files, JavaScript files, and let's do server.js. no errors. It's always a good sign. And then go back into here, refresh this. Let's do Billy Bob, and the password will be cake. Let's log in. Hello, Billy Bob. And now for the moment of truth, let's select all users from in here. And there we go. So when someone has logged in, they're being added to our database by clicking this button, which is then handled by this route here. And so, of course, you wouldn't want to do this by every time someone logs in, you add them to your database. You'd, of course, have some kind of functionality where you can switch between, say, signing up and logging in. But anyway, that's just how you get everything rock and rolling with Sequelize in your database. And in the next video, I'm going to be going over some authentication schemas and strategies. So we've just been using this form. Let's use a Hapi plugin to basically do the same thing. I'll see you in the next video.